Good evening, everyone. It is February 3rd, and it's 6:15. I'm going to hereby open the first of two public hearings on the petition for charter change that's before us. We're going to do a formal reading of the petition, but before we do that, I'd like to just go through a couple of ground rules. So my brave fellow select board members who made it out tonight and I are serving in an administrative role. We basically convene this public hearing. We make sure that the public has an opportunity to speak on this issue. But you know, we're not voting on this. The town is voting on this. We are just here to conduct the hearing and make sure that there's space for people to speak at. But that said, this is still a select board meeting, so you're going to direct your comments to the board, and I'd ask that you respect that, and we keep things civil and productive in our comments. My hope is that we can wrap this up by 8 o'clock. It's Friday, and I know people have other places to be, so I'm not going to spend too much longer talking. So I'd like people to try to keep their comments to about 3 minutes. I'm not going to hold a strict time, but I'm going to be watching the clock, and if you're starting to go a little long in the tooth, I'm going to ask you to begin to kind of complete your thoughts. And you can always come back to the mic and speak again if you want to. And on that, I really would encourage people to listen to what's said from other people who speak tonight. And if your comment has been said already, to seriously think about letting other people say their piece, because we want to respect people's time and let everyone speak who can. If your point's already been made, maybe someone else has something new to bring to the conversation. And with that, unless I missed anything, I don't think so.
I guess just like, we're not going to make any comments, right? So
yeah,
you're
the
gonna,
board's not going
direct
to.
it to us, but we're not going to have any response.
Yeah, if anything, we'd only kind of respond if there was something sort of like a point of order or like a factual question. And so the final point is we're going to have this hearing tonight, and then we're going to have another hearing on Tuesday, the 7th. Thank you. And that'll be during the regularly scheduled Brattleboro Select Board meeting. And after that, the next time that this is going to become before the town is at town meeting day on the 7th of March. And that'll give people an opportunity to vote on it. So with that, I'll ask Liz, I'm going to make the board members do a little work tonight and have them help me with the formal reading. So Liz, if you want to start us out.
Sure. Warning for public hearing on the Town of Brattleboro petition for a charter amendment. Shall I just go here?
Sure.
Okay. Shall the Town of Brattleboro amend its charter as follows?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Can you?
No? You want all of this?
Start. Yes,
Okay.
please.
All right, let's begin. The legal voters
You did
and
page
citizens
Yeah.
of the Town of Brattleboro are hereby notified that the Select Board will hold two public hearings on a petition that the Town of Brattleboro has received for proposed amendment to the Brattleboro Town Charter on Tuesday, February 3rd, 2023 at 6:15, and Tuesday, February 7th, 2023 at 6:15 p.m. That's Friday and Tuesday, in the Select Board Meeting Room at the Brattleboro Town Offices, 230 Main Street. The Town of Brattleboro has received one petition proposing an amendment to the Town Charter pursuant to 17 V.S.A. Section 2345. The public is invited to the public hearing to discuss the provisions of the proposed charter amendment and to make comment thereon. This warning of the public hearing shall be published in the Brattleboro Reformer and posted in 5 conspicuous places within the town. A copy of each of the proposed charter amendments is filed at the town clerk's office in the Town of Brattleboro for public inspection. Voter: a person of full age who is a citizen of the United States and a resident of the state of Vermont and the Town of Brattleboro, who has taken the voter's oath and whose name appears on the checklist of the Town of Brattleboro. Article 2. Shall the Town of Brattleboro amend its charter as follows? Shall the charter of the Town of Brattleboro as amended be further amended to provide protections for residential tenants from evictions without just cause by adopting and adding a new section to read as follows? A, residential tenants as defined in Chapter 137 of Title IX of the Vermont Statutes annotated shall be protected from eviction without just cause, where just cause shall include, number one, a tenant's material breach of a written rental agreement. Number two, a tenant's violation of state statutes regulating tenant obligations in residential rental agreements. Number three, non-payment of rent. And number four, a tenant's failure to accept written, reasonable, good faith renewal terms. B, this charter provision excludes from just cause the expiration of a rental agreement as sole grounds for termination of tenancy. Exemptions to this charter amendment include properties defined in Chapter 137 of Title IX, in addition to, number one, sublets, number two, in-unit rentals, number three, owner-occupied duplexes and triplexes, and number four, accessory dwelling units on owner's property.
Daniel, continue.
All right. D, a landlord shall not evict a tenant for the sole purpose of raising the rent. When rent increases are legitimate, the total rent increase, including consideration of operating expenses, maintenance expenses, capital improvements, and cost of living, CPI, adjustments, shall not exceed 12% in any 12-month period. E, the terms of this amendment shall not be binding on a landlord in cases where the tenant is effectively evicted by extreme weather or acts of God. Otherwise, a landlord may evict a tenant for purposes such as major required construction, lead remediation and abatement work, or housing a family member or members. However, the following restrictions apply to such evictions. If a comparable unit owned by the landlord is already available, or if such a unit becomes available before recovery of the rental unit, the landlord shall rescind the notice of eviction and dismiss any action filed to recover possession of the unit and offer the comparable unit to the tenant at the rate currently paid by the tenant. 2. If a non-comparable unit becomes available before recovery, the landlord shall offer the non-comparable unit to the tenant. 3. If a landlord cannot accommodate the tenant, the landlord must pay 1 month's rent as hardship and relocation assistance. 4. The rental unit must be offered first to the displaced tenant when the required repairs, abatement, construction, or other work is complete, or when a family member moves out before a term of 36 months. F. The landlord seeking to recover possession of a unit must submit with the notice of eviction a notarized affidavit attesting to the need for the eviction, and when appropriate, the identity of the family member or members and the intent of the family members to have no other principal residence. Evidence that the landlord has not acted in good faith may include, but is not limited to, any of the following. 1. The landlord or family members for whom the rental unit was vacated did not move into the unit within 3 months of the recovery date and subsequently did not occupy the unit as a principal residence for a minimum of 36 consecutive months. 2. The landlord rented the unit to a new tenant at an increased price exceedingly, I'm assuming that's supposed to say exceeding the yearly rental increase as allowed in Section C of this charter amendment. G. This legislation shall take effect upon approval. H. If any provision of this legislation is held to be unconstitutional or to be otherwise invalid by any court of competent jurisdiction, such invalidity shall not affect other provisions and they are held to be severable. I. This legislation can be rescinded in a plebiscite according to law without approval of the state legislature. Signed, the Brattleboro Select Board.
And obviously, the warning is signed by the Brattleboro Select Board.
Yes,
It's
thank
not
you.
the petition. Okay, so having consulted with the town attorney, I understand that it's within my right to sort of pick who sort of starts this, and I'd like to give one of the petitioners an opportunity, someone who was responsible for the drafting of it, to speak to the item first. And then from there, what I'd like to do is, I don't know if every single person who's here wants to speak, so I'm going to let people kind of raise their hands, and then I will sort of call on people who were here first and try to give people an opportunity to think about what they want to say. If it gets pretty disorderly, then I'm going to ask people to start queuing up behind the mic. And then what I like to do is go from one person in the room to one person in Zoom, but I will make sure that everyone gets to speak once first before anyone gets called on a second time. So with that, I'd invite, is it Ms. Gossage who's going to be speaking on this first? So if I'd like to invite her up to the mic. And yeah, again, if you can keep your comments to about 3 minutes, it would be much appreciated for everyone. Thank you.
I think I can do 2.
Excellent.
So my name is Marta Gossage, and as many people know, I became involved in the Just Cause eviction movement after watching firsthand as a friend received a 60-day notice. I watched the extraordinary effort needed daily to find a new place to live, which took longer than 90 days in her case. That's why I'm here. I wanted to bring up a few things to explain some of the items in the petition. Owner-occupied duplexes, triplexes, accessory dwelling units, rooms in your house, and sublets are all excluded. This ordinance would not apply. Regarding the first right of refusal at the expiration of a lease term, it doesn't really matter if you're month-to-month or on a lease. Getting a 60-day or 90-day notice has the same effect. There are first right of refusal clauses in places like DC and Philadelphia that are inspirations for this clause. It's incredibly cruel to have a subclass of people who have to be ready to move every year of their life. A 60-day or 90-day notice to leave puts you in a game of musical chairs for housing, regardless if it's a lease or month-to-month agreement ending. Second, the 12% cap on rent increases. This is not rent control or even as restrictive as most rent stabilization. In other places, there are restrictions at 3%, 4%, and 5%. 12% is intended only so that drastic rent increases aren't a form of effective eviction. Well, landlords would tell you that ending no-cause eviction will only make them more picky about who they rent to. Anyone who has competed against 20 other applicants this year for a single apartment will tell you that reality appears to already be here. Finally, many of the arguments against just cause eviction talk about drug houses and drug use. I want to make very clear that in this proposal, we are talking about tenants who have paid their rent and not broken any rules. That's who just cause eviction protects. When tenants cause damage, don't pay their rent, disturb other tenants, or are participating in illegal activity, there are legal remedies. I'm sorry if landlords don't think it moves fast enough, but we have housing court so that tenants can fight back against unjust eviction. No-cause eviction effectively does an end run around a system of checks and balances that have been developed in order that no one is deprived of their housing because of discrimination or baseless allegations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta. And I realize I forgot to ask at the beginning, you did that anyways, but can you, when you speak, can you just state your name and where you're from for the record? And Marta, I think you got it. Yep, come on up.
I'm going to check on Zoom.
Yeah, I'm gonna-
Sally Fegley, Wyndham Property Management. I'm here tonight to ask the voters of Brattleboro to vote against Article 2. Article 2 would ban no-cause evictions. The term no-cause evictions is very misleading. They are not actually evictions. What they are is at the end of the lease term, when the lease terminates, the tenant can say to the landlord that the tenant no longer wants to remain in the apartment, and that ends the relationship. The landlord can also say to the tenant that the landlord doesn't want the tenant to stay in the apartment and end the relationship. It's a contract between the two of them. No-cause evictions are also not done for no cause. There are reasons housing providers ask tenants to leave. Housing providers don't ask responsible tenants to leave their units. They welcome those tenants to their units. Housing providers ask the troublesome tenants to leave, and no-cause evictions are an easy way to do that, leaving no blemish on that tenant's rental history. Reasons landlords ask tenants to leave at the end of a lease term are drug trafficking, making loud noise in the middle of the night, damage to apartment units, smoking where it's not allowed, hoarding. There are many, many reasons why housing providers think that tenants are not good fits in their buildings. The fact of the matter is that if the ban goes into effect and Article 2 passes, the biggest group who will suffer from that will be the responsible tenants who remain in the buildings, because those tenants will have to continue to put up with that negative behavior. Those tenants will be deprived of their quiet enjoyment of their apartments. People say, well, you can just do just cause eviction. Just cause eviction requires going through the court system. The court system is very backlogged. It takes from 2 months to sometimes over a year to get a hearing heard in the court. Meanwhile, during that period of time, the responsible tenants in the building continue to put up with the negative behavior. Even at the end of that period, after the court hearing is held, the housing provider might not succeed because the tenant might say, oh no, I stopped smoking, or prove that I did drug dealing, or how can you prove that I was making noise in the middle of the night? It's very likely that the troublesome tenant would not be removed even with a just cause eviction. The no-cause eviction is an easy, painless way to protect the responsible tenants in the building. The real problem with housing in Brattleboro is that there's not enough of it.
I'm going to ask you to finish your thought.
We need more housing, and the solution is to build more housing, not to punish the housing providers who are already providing housing in town. Please vote no on Article 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to go to Zoom now. No hands at the moment. Back to the room. Yep. Just state your name for the record and where you're from.
Good evening. My name is Zoe Cunningham Cook, and I live in Brattleboro, Vermont. I moved back here in summer of 2020. I grew up here. I'm a local. And I've been organizing with Marta Gossage and Ann Zimmerman to, among others, to get just cause eviction on the ballot for March 7th. Also, I just want to mention I'm an attorney for Vermont Legal Aid, and I do eviction defense and criminal record expungement. Vermont laws permit residential landlords to evict tenants for no reason at all, similar to at-will firing for employment. In comparison, 4 other states, including New Hampshire, and multiple municipalities only permit landlords to evict for cause, as in they must have a viable reason to evict a tenant. The charter change up for vote on the March 7th ballot will change this law in Brattleboro if approved by voters. This change is not as dramatic as some dissidents have made it seem. It will merely change the law so that landlords can evict for the just cause reasons that are already available under law. Evicting tenants is a legal process. The bases for evicting tenants for cause are non-payment of rent and breach of the rental agreement, which includes failure to comply with material terms of the lease or criminal activity. Research by one of my colleagues at Vermont Legal Aid found that in Vermont, prior to the pandemic, 70% of eviction cases were for non-payment of rent alone. The V.S.A program assisted with lessening that number dramatically. 25% less evictions were filed. However, the number of no-cause evictions increased to over 40% in fiscal year 2022. The reason for this is strongly suggested by the fact that no-cause evictions do not require a landlord to prove anything in court. Many people, upon receiving notices of termination of tenancy, move out. People do have an incentive to go through due process and to prove their case. If a landlord wants to kick someone out to dramatically increase the rent, the easiest way to do that is by choosing no-cause eviction. As a housing attorney with Vermont Legal Aid, I have seen that particular reasoning in several of my cases, 2 of which were in Brattleboro. It isn't fair to kick someone out of their home, sometimes out of the community, when they haven't done anything wrong. Some people are asking how this measure can address the housing and homelessness crisis. We should all, including landlords, be doing our part to prevent homelessness. Allowing someone to stay in their home is the fastest and easiest way to prevent homelessness. Just cause eviction laws work to do that. A 2019 Princeton study found that cities with just cause eviction laws have a statistically significant lower rate of both evictions and eviction filings.
I'll ask you just to wrap up your comment.
Yes. With a 0.7 vacancy rate in Brattleboro, there's nowhere else to go if someone is evicted. Just cause eviction is just one of the pieces of that puzzle to address the housing and homelessness community. But if passed, it will be an effective one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Zoe, now I do see a hand on Zoom.
Abby Manukin.
Abby Manukin, welcome.
Where'd she go?
Hi there. My name is Abby Manukin, and I am a District 2 town meeting rep. I think it's redistricted now. And I'm also a homeowner. So I am not a renter. I am super privileged to own my own home, but I am a huge supporter of this just cause eviction amendment. And I want to thank everyone who worked so hard to get this on the ballot. I guess I don't have anything written down, but I'll just try to make a few brief points. One is that Brattleboro is considered a compassionate town. I think it was officially voted on as a compassionate town. This is such a simple and clear way to actually take action to go along with that language. What does it mean to be a compassionate community if we are literally willing to allow landlords to evict people for no cause? That makes no sense at all. And it feels like this is actually really a struggle between, this is a class issue and this is a justice issue. This is an economic justice issue, and that overlaps with so many other areas of social justice work. But there is a growing inequality between the wealthy and everyone else, and people in the owning class have more and have greater and greater rights, and other people have lesser and lesser. And there is a growing number of people who are housing insecure, growing number of homeless people. On a night like tonight, it's so terrifying to think of our neighbors in this community who don't have a warm home to be in, a safe home to be in this moment. And a just cause eviction would do so much to help prevent more people from getting into that place. So this is a just cause eviction. And I know that a lot of landlords are going to speak to how they need to have ways to evict people if A, B, and C, and this will still allow that. This is just cause, just being the key word here. And I just want to speak on behalf of justice and economic justice, compassion, and really encourage voters to vote for this in March. I think that we can and should take this step forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Back to the room. Yes.
I'm Jason Cooper. I have been investing in and providing housing for close to 40 years now. And it's been getting harder and harder to do. And I can say that there are times when it's certainly we want to end a tenancy for reasons that are challenging. Most of our tenants are great people. They respect the property. They respect their neighbors. And we as rental property owners will do everything we can to take care of them and to maintain their tenancy and get them to stay. It's rare that we want someone to leave. The times we do want someone to leave is when they're being disruptive or destructive. And certainly the easiest way to do that is just to say we're not going to renew this because it's just not a good fit. Removing this option from us will mean that the only way we can preserve and protect both the property and take care of our tenants who are in the building is to file for the eviction for cause. It's harder to prove, it takes longer, it's more expensive. And what that means is, first of all, we are going to have to be more careful about who we take in as tenants. We can't afford to take the risk when it takes, as Sally pointed out, up to a year to remove somebody. That's a big, expensive hit. We often lose good tenants who say, I'm not going to live next to this, and they leave. So it makes being a rental property provider more difficult and more expensive. The housing situation in this community is difficult, and one of the reasons is people don't want to invest in a community where it is this expensive and this onerous and difficult on the property owner to provide housing. I recently did a search of what is available on Airbnb. In Windham County, there are more than 1,000 standalone rental units that are now off the market and being rented by Airbnb, most likely because the owners of those properties are saying they can't deal or are not interested in dealing with the landlord-tenant laws and with long-term tenants. This housing market is shrinking because people are not adding, but they are going away. Some people are saying, I quit. I am going to either sell out to someone who's going to live there, or I'm going to just board it up and walk away from it. Many of the properties that I've acquired over the years have been properties that have been taken by the banks, and the banks just want to get rid of them. And so I've been picking them up. I'm coming to the end of my rope with this, and my only alternative becomes that I have to now file for cause. What this does to the tenants is they will now have the mark of being evicted on their record. And in a housing community and a housing market as tight as this one is, those people who have been evicted for cause, they will never find housing in this community. Those are people who lose the most when they end up being evicted as opposed to just having their lease come to an end.
I'll ask you just to wrap up your comment.
I think this is a very bad thing for the tenants, for the town, for anyone who wants to invest in properties here to try and provide housing. I think there's more losers than gainers in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I see Kurt with his hand up. Welcome, Kurt.
Are we okay now?
I'm okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kurt Dimes. I live in Brattleboro, District 2, and I work with Brattleboro Common Sense.
Kurt, I'm going to interrupt for you a second. If you're trying to be seen, we can't see you.
Oh,
I guess there's no requirement.
No, it's just up to him if he wants to. We just can't.
now
No.
We can hear you.
I think I'm clicking in the right place. Let's try one more time. Now, can you see me?
No, and I'm going to give you a choice. Either you can continue now without being able for us to see you, or I'm going to.
Let's continue now. I'm not so good looking that it's of any benefit for people to see me.
Okay, just go ahead and state your name and where you're from for the record, please.
Kurt Dimes, District 2 of Brattleboro. I work with Brattleboro Common Sense, which is the author of most of this legislation. I want to oppose the legislation because it was hijacked from BCS and by RAD, and it was added. It was amended with this section B, which makes all leases perpetually binding on the landlord. This is a legal absurdity. Can you imagine Abby, perhaps Abby wants to move, wants to sell her house, wants to go away. She can't, because if she has tenants, they have the right to stay and she has no right to end the lease. The other thing, it was illegal, or I talked to a few attorneys, they say it will not pass muster in the legislature. And it's such an egregious violation of the Constitution that it will be an embarrassment to the tenants' rights movement, which I favor. And our legislation was ruined by these interlopers from out of town. They also set up Brattleboro for fair eviction or something with one of their own members in order to give an impression that there was local support. It's been a fraud and a cheat, and it's been campaigned rather deceptively. So I'd like to say, just think about how absurd it is to make a legal contract binding on one side on the landlords in perpetuity. It's just unfair and absurd. Everybody should vote against this so that we have room to make a good JCE, a good just cause eviction amendment, as we had before they came. The just cause eviction that happened in Burlington last year is not the same as this. The one in Seattle is not the same. It has 18 exceptions. This version is no good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kurt. Yeah, and it's helpful. Yes, absolutely, Frick. And helpful for us just to mention sort of procedurally, if this were to pass at town meeting day, then kind of the next step would be it goes to Montpelier and would go through the legislature. So it would need to be approved on that level as well. And I think it's just good for people to know that we got Frick first, and I've got you in mind. So if you want to go ahead and take the mic.
Frick Bright, District 3. I would like to, first of all, take issue with Kurt. I think he's a perfectly handsome fellow, and it's unfortunate that we didn't get to see him. I also would like to speak on behalf of a bunch of people in the community who have been working to house and keep housed people who are at the margins. They include not only several people seated here who are housing providers who have taken on some extremely difficult people and some who were not able to be here tonight. Also, on behalf of people who I know who have worked in partnership with us in various nonprofits to provide support and funding for people who have had challenges. A lot of them can't speak publicly about it and are very upset about this, along with many things that have happened along the way leading up to this. It feels like with how a lot of the legal process goes for us landlords and for the good tenants, that there is no regard for what will actually work, what will make things better, what will inspire good local people to be involved in housing, what will keep people housed in a way that's sustainable. One of the comments I heard today was that it used to be that this particular social worker would ask somebody who their landlord was. They would say who it was, and the social worker would know who it was, have their phone number, have a relationship with them, be able to call them up, and work out problems if they could be worked out. Years ago, that was my experience dealing with legal aid from time to time. It has not been recently. It used to be that way to some degree with the courts. That has become much more difficult. There are ways to solve problems. This is not it. I've been working for 2 years trying to get a hold of our national legislators, our representatives in Washington, who all know who I am and have known for many decades who I was. And I have had a hard time getting calls back. Full funding for Section 8 would have solved a lot of the problems. It is a program where you can actually buy a house. It prevents the project type downsides of things like we see in urban centers, and
Can you
we're
just ask
starting
you
to
to
see
wrap up
here.
your comment, please?
Anyway, I am hoping that you guys are thinking about impaneling the Housing Committee, which hundreds of us have asked for. Is that on the agenda for next week, or?
This isn't a select board
Yeah.
meeting, so we're not going to talk about that kind of stuff.
You can't even say whether it's on the agenda?
The agenda is published, so.
Okay. Anyway,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you, Frick.
Vote opposition.
What's that?
I was just going to say, I urge people to vote no on this and then get active to do things that will actually make things better. I think there are problems that need to be solved, and yeah.
Thank you, Frick. So I see that one I can't read.
Eli.
Eli. Oh man, I don't know why it's that one I always have a hard time with. And then I already have a hand queued in the room.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you.
Eli Coughlin Galbraith, District 2. I'm on Representative Town Meeting. I'd like to channel some family members for a moment and speak on the economics of this move. No one likes an economist because we're cursed to never bring good news. So sorry in advance. Just cause eviction will make it harder to be a landlord. That creates an incentive for landlords to do other things, for example, to sell. More property on the market means lower prices. That means more chances for renters to become homeowners. It also means lower property values. As a homeowner, that's bad news for me. And as a town, I think this town needs it really badly. I don't have to remind anyone that we're in a housing crisis, that prices have skyrocketed, and that we need every tool to fight this that we can possibly get. I'm sorry that this is the choice in front of you right now, is do you push the lever to depress property values or not? And also, every investor knows that every investment is a risk. No investment always goes up. If you invest in property, sometimes you have to accept that the line goes down, that the property values go down. You do not get to the height of 2021 and then say, this is my new value of my land forever. And if you make small moves to push the values of property down and to encourage landlords to sell, then you make it easier for more people who are renting now to become homeowners later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eli. No, we got Hugh in the back there has his hand up first, and then Spoon, I've got you in my mental queue next. Welcome.
Good evening. My name's Hugh Barber. I'm a 31-year landlord, and I once sat in your seat, Ian. I'm going to speak against the ban on no-fault evictions. I think you have to take a look at who might get a no-fault eviction or a notice. They may be a hoarder, a disruptive person, a potential drug dealer, and a hoarder may create a fire code issue as well as infestation. And if the landlord needs to resort to litigation, it's going to be a painful process of weeks to years to convince the court. There'll be multiple hearings, thousands of dollars of legal fees with no end result or duration of the proceeding. This provides the landlord an expeditious way to get the lease terminated. And it's going to be a lot more expensive, more efficient, better for the tenants, and arguably better for the one who is being asked to leave, because they're not going to have any derogatory record on their record. Like Jason said earlier, nobody's going to rent to this person who was evicted for cause or had allegations of cause. So it's kind of a win-win for landlord and tenant. And maybe the tenant will smarten up and clean up his act or her act and get more responsible once they're out. But I just can't see how this ban on no-cause evictions is going to help anybody at all. And I realize it's a difficult market, and I feel bad for people that may lose their homes. But we're running a business. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on fire code issues, wiring, sprinklers, and all that. And we can't afford to have big disruptions in rental revenue and still run these places in a manner that they have grown to expect. The amenities, the safety of their facility. So this whole thing is a bunch of bullshit in my mind, and I'm sorry to use that word, but we have a big investment in these properties, and we need to be able to protect them. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. And next hand up is
Looks like Laura Stamus.
Laura. Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you and we can't see you, which is fine unless you'd like to be seen. Oh, there we go. Now we can.
You go. All right, sweet. My name is Laura Stamus and I live in Brattleboro, and I am a strong supporter of the Just Cause eviction charter change. I believe that housing is a basic human right, and I believe that this change is going to be the most important for bringing more justice into this community. I was a part of the community safety review team, and I feel that keeping people housed is a very, very clear way that was evident in that report to improve people's safety. I don't really have a ton to add. I believe a lot of the statements that people are saying tonight and the people who wrote this charter, and I'm just in absolute full support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. So Spoon, got you up next.
Spoon Agave. You guys are lucky this is going right to the voters and you don't have to weigh in on it.
You said I didn't.
I think Mr. Galbraith and Mr. Barber actually framed it in very clear and stark terms. This is an issue between the investors, the profits that are to be made in the ownership of property, and those people who are poor and can't find housing at all. And I fall very strongly on the human right that everybody has to a place to live. I think it was also clearly stated by Mr. Cooper that we have 1,000 units in the county that are not available for renters because they're Airbnbs. That's another issue, and the state's working on trying to address that, but that's a ways off. Having spoken to to both landlords and renters, and I too have been caught in the middle of this. I just recently had to move from one rental place at $750 a month to another one at $1,800 a month. But I'm sharing that now, so it's not so bad. But just looking to find another place and looking at the rents were just astonishing and mind-boggling, to say the least. But what I hear, number one, most of the things that the landlords are concerned about that they can't evict for are, in fact, allowable reasons for evictions. And the other thing I hear, that most of the problems really occur in the courts. If a tenant refuses to leave, you're stuck, anybody, with a 3-month court battle at least. There are other ways, I think, that we can work. I feel like the first thing we have to do is get everybody housed, and this needs to pass. And then after that, we do have to look at the impact that it has. We need to get the numbers from the landlords of exactly what those impacts are, and then find an answer to those problems, which there may be. We might have a town rental inspector that could come right to the aid of a landlord that is in a quandary. There's all kinds of things we might do to address landlords' concerns. But right now, we need to get everybody housed.
Thank you very much, Spoon. Back to Zoom. No hands up at the moment. Yep.
There was a couple of people.
Oh, did we have a hand before?
The front and at the back.
Okay. I'm not. Who got it first?
Aaron, I think.
Yep. Yeah. Sorry. All right. So that person in the back, and then I've got you third. All right. You have to be patient with me. As your humble chair, I will try my very best to be as fair as possible with people and when they go.
So my name's Aaron Smith. I was born here, lived here my whole life. I've been a landlord for about 25 years. It's getting harder and harder to be a landlord. I think this bill will have unintended consequences. Eliminating no-cause eviction is going to be troublesome, because when you have to go through just cause, not only does the landlord have to go to court and prove it, it creates a contentious environment between the landlord and tenant. Now, I've been through worked on a couple of evictions, and it was very difficult and costly for me. I mean, I still work a full-time job. I'm not getting rich being a landlord. I can tell you that firsthand. With all the troubles that come with a landlord, you're worried about the tight housing market. I can tell you in the last several years, it wasn't until recent that I didn't have 1 or 2 units empty. And the reason for that is I'm not in a hurry to get taken advantage of again. I'm in a financial place where I don't have to rent the units. Something like this will push me over the edge, and I won't rent any of the units. There's just too much risk, not enough return. I mean, I'm lucky to be worth minimum wage on my building, and I honestly mean that. A lot of people have gone the Airbnb route, and that's because they don't have the negative drawbacks of a bad tenant. There's also the aspect of, a no-cause eviction isn't because a landlord just wants somebody out. There's a cause, but you have to prove that cause if you take it to court with a for-cause eviction. And not being able to end a lease is ridiculous. I mean, that's like being married, and then because things go bad, you'd never be able to get a divorce. Does that make sense? I mean, it's the same thing, but that's all I have.
Thank you, Aaron. I do see a hand now on Zoom. Is it?
Evan Chadwick.
Evan Chadwick. Evan, welcome. Please state your name and where you're from for the record.
Hey, folks, how you doing?
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
yes, we got you. Welcome.
All right, thanks, guys. This is a really important topic, and just to kind of piggyback on what I believe Aaron just said, to articulate kind of a little bit more, a lot of the landlords are stating what the risks that they are taking. And I think Mr. Goodnow, who's now an attorney as well, can maybe also kind of understand this in a way of dollars and cents from the legal perspective. What we're dealing with in no-cause evictions, the fastest way to evict someone in the state of Vermont is if they stop paying rent. That's a pretty straightforward process. It still does take weeks, if not months, to get what's called a writ of possession, to grant the landlord possession of the leased premises. So we're talking a couple months with the fastest way. In my experience as a practicing attorney in Brattleboro, the slowest way to evict someone is for some cause or no cause. And from my experience recently, given the COVID backlog in cases, especially in Windham County, where we have a civil judge 1, maybe 2 days a week presiding over all of the civil disputes in Windham County, it can take months, if not years. And so as also a landlord in Brattleboro, if I am thinking about how I am going to offer a lease to an individual, you have to take into account that. I'm fortunate because I can do that legal work myself. For a lot of other hardworking Brattleboro residents who have 1, maybe 2 units, they don't know how to evict someone. They don't know the process, and it is very technical. If you mess up one of the procedures, then you have to start from the beginning again. It can take thousands, tens of thousands of dollars in order to evict certain tenants from situations where maybe there's not a clear-cut reason, such as dealing drugs out of the unit, such as failing to pay rent. The no-cause provision allows them an opportunity to get out of a lease, not quickly. You still have to go through the litigation process if the tenant files an answer, asks for a jury trial. There is a lot of expense and a lot of delay. Cutting out that leg from landlords, I think, is unjust in these circumstances. I think it's going to limit the housing market, not expand the opportunities. From the people that I have talked to, many have gotten frustrated with the last month's rent prohibition now, and they're throwing their hands up. They're saying enough is enough. I'm just going to sell the property, especially now with the inflated property values. And what do you see? You see a lot of Airbnbs coming up in the Brattleboro area asking for $150 to $200 a night. So the question that we really need to ask ourselves is what kind of rental market do we want to have? Do we want to be able to give tenants a reasonable course to evict someone for a variety of reasons, to give them the freedom to do so if they deem it as necessary?
Evan, I'm just going to ask you to wrap up your comment, please.
So I'm just certainly against the just cause amendment. I think it would be a huge mistake for Brattleboro. I think it would be a huge mistake for those hardworking landlords who really work hard to provide safe housing for the community. And I think it's going to put us farther back, not forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evan. And I realize as we get some new people on Zoom and in the room that may have not been here when I sort of explained at the beginning, we're kind of trying to keep people's comments to about 3 minutes and to please listen to people who speak before you. And if someone said something that you were planning on saying, maybe wait and let other people speak who might have new things to say. And what we're hoping to finish around 8 o'clock if possible. So the next person in the room was in the back. Yes.
Dan Sisto. Okay, you got two options, basically.
Sorry, name and where you're from, for the record.
Where am I from? Brattleboro.
Thank you.
Does everybody understand the word rental and what it actually means? You understand the word ownership? Big difference, okay? What you're going to find yourself into in this town of Brattleboro is you're going to have big, massive corporations starting to buy up the properties, which they're already starting to do. See it on Main Street, see it out in West Brattleboro. I'm part of them. They have lawyers. They have money. What you're gonna take out is small guys that actually care about the community. These guys are gonna steamroll you. They means nothing. $1,000 rent, they can sit on it, but they're gonna make sure that they get what they need. So you're gonna cause a lot of problems that way, number one. Number two, Town of Brattleboro, you gonna start covering these? You guys keep coming up with all of these sort of renter, benefits and perks. Who's covering that we're paying the taxes? We're paying the water, we're paying the sewer, correct? Yes, would be the answer. There's a lot of great rental tenants out there, wonderful people, but there's also a lot of problems that you guys don't even see. The disgustingness, it's rampant. We also have Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust that was supposed to be developed to sort of help this along. Now you're asking the people that put their hard-earned money into an investment property to basically do the same thing. You gotta start thinking for the people that are actually owning versus the renters all the time. And if people work hard, they pay attention, and they do what they're asked, they never get launched. It's plain and simple.
Thank you very much. And I'll just remind people that this is a petition that was brought forth by the people of Brattleboro, and that the select board is just an administrative body allowing for the public hearing on the petition, and that the people, no, you are addressing me, but I just want to remind that it's the people who decide this are the people of Brattleboro when they vote on it in March.
Okay, but again, you have a small amount of ownership
and
a large amount of rentals, right?
I'm not disputing or actually really addressing anything except for a little bit of what I was picking up was maybe that you may have thought that this was coming from the town of Big T Town of Brattleboro municipal government, and I was just trying to verify that.
That's not what I was saying.
Okay, good, great then, we're on the same page. All right, back to Zoom. No, and in that case.
I apologize for reading from my phone.
No worries.
Ann Zimmerman, and I am a familiar face at everyone's books downtown, where I've worked for over 2 decades. I am a renter. I currently rent in Guilford because that's where I found housing. But I'm here largely to speak for my friend Damaris Mills of West Brattleboro, who couldn't be here tonight. A good portion of what I have to say was written by her. Damaris lives in Westbrook Court apartment complex. She's a good tenant. She pays her rent. She doesn't cause any trouble. In October, Damaris and many others at Westbrook Court received notices that their leases would not be renewed for no cause. They had 60 or 90 days to move out. They'd need to move in the middle of winter, no less. The majority of those who got the notice of lease non-renewal were handicapped in some way, elderly or low income, and several were on housing assistance such as Section 8 or V.S.A. Apparently, the new owners didn't really want to deal with that. Immediately, distress set in for this group of neighbors. For instance, Damaris's neighbor, Matt, was in the apartment that he was in because he needs to be in a handicapped accessible unit. He's facing some major surgery that'll put him in a wheelchair, and he can't just pick up and move anywhere. The timing of COVID has put his surgery on hold 3 times so far, so right now he can hardly walk, let alone try to move somewhere. One of her other neighbors was a single mother with a daughter in high school. She was not able to find housing around here, so she was forced to take something in Keene. Her daughter stayed behind, basically staying on a couch so she could finish her year of high school. So not only was this no-cause eviction breaking up a community of neighbors who spend a lot of time together and have formed a community, it was also, in this particular case, breaking up a family. Not hard to imagine that situation being replicated in other places around town. Damaris is in her 70s. She suffers from Parkinson's, and so she also needs a first-floor unit. And what Damaris would like you to know is how much trauma and distress comes from finding out that you have 60 to 90 days to move. In this housing market, there's basically nowhere to go, especially if you need a first floor apartment because you have a degenerative condition, especially if you're on housing assistance or are low income. Damaris is asking for humanity from her fellow human beings and the voters of Brattleboro. And I'll just add that Damaris and her neighbors are the victims of a housing crisis, some of which is driven by forces that are larger than the scope of this room, and some of which would need additional solutions that I hope will be looked at as well. No one who is advocating for this basic tenant protection thinks it's any kind of panacea for all of our housing issues. But this charter change is something that can be done to alleviate some of the considerable stress of folks like Damaris and her friends, stress that goes along with being in a precarious housing situation, which renting is almost by definition. I have certainly felt that stress while raising my kids as a single parent, and I will tell you there is nothing quite like it. And that was during a supposedly much less difficult market.
And I'll just ask you to wrap up your comment,
Okay,
please.
sure. Brattleboro can enact just cause eviction to protect renters like Damaris and her neighbors who pay their rent and abide by the rules from having to be in a state of constant worry, and we will all be better for it as a community if we can make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. No hands on Zoom, so yep. And I've got you next.
So first of all, my understanding is that the Westgate sale was the result.
I apologize. You've spoken already once
Yes, I
already,
have.
so I'm actually
Jason
going
Cooper,
to.
yes.
I'm going to have you take a seat then, and I'll have.
Jackie said she's okay with it.
Are you sure? Okay.
I'll try and be quick.
I just want to keep the rules that I sort of said at the beginning. So
I'm Jason Cooper, and my understanding is that the Westgate was a sale to an out-of-state corporation that took over, and in that sale, they ended up terminating people. I don't know why, but they decided they wanted to let a lot of people go. We, by the way, may have a handicapped accessible apartment coming up in the next month or two, so that, Ann, if you want to talk to me about that, I'd be willing to talk about that. It seems that a lot of the rationale for why this proposal should go forth is based on anecdotal stories. I know somebody who had this happen to them. And part of the problem with that is I'd really like to hear the other side of the story. I'd like to know who that landlord was and why, because without that side of the story, you don't really have a whole picture. And that's not a good way to make a decision, especially something that's taking away private property owners' rights. And what I would like to see is, I would like to see this town have a housing committee that can look fully at all sides of a proposal and come up with a good suggestion that's informed of how we can make things better. There are definitely things that can be done to make the housing situation better in this community. More expedient access to the legal system would be huge for the people who are trying to provide decent housing in this town. Thank you.
thank you, Jason. Jackie, if you want to. Just making sure there's nobody else on Zoom. Okay.
Jackie Reese, and I'm from Brattleboro. I am a landlord. What Jason Cooper was just saying, and the reason why I said to let him say it, was basically, what a lot of us are feeling, which is that it's the big corporations who come in. You can go ahead and lower the value of buildings, and a lot of the reason why those buildings' value is being lowered is because they haven't been kept up. And there's a whole thing behind that, but it happened in the building across from me. The building just went down. It wasn't taken care of because there were troublesome tenants in all of the apartments, and it was beneficial to that landlord. But aside from that, when you have a big corporation come in and take over, what will happen is they'll look at your rents. And if you have somebody who's been in there for 15, 20 years and their rent hasn't been raised because the local landlords don't raise their rents. If they're a cooperative tenant that's not giving you any kind of trouble, you want to keep them. You'll do everything that you can to keep a tenant that is not bothering the other tenants. Whereas if you get a house like they had across the street where you have one tenant who comes in and is an uncooperative tenant or who allows things to happen inside their apartment, the other tenants suffer. And you then will lose those tenants. You lose the good tenants. I hate to use good and bad, but that's what it is. You lose the tenants who are responsible, who are paying their rent on time. So your building value goes down, the property goes down, the neighborhood goes down. I had to step in because I was starting to get affected by that. The tenants that I was starting to bring into my building were like, oh, I don't know if I want to look at an apartment on your street, because I know of this other building. It's like, okay, well, there goes that one. So it not only brings down the building, it brings down the neighborhood. And then you get the values of them going lower, but then the amount of money that you need to bring those buildings back up to code even is so enormous that the only people that you can sell to are these big companies from out of town. So the other part that I just wanted to say briefly was that eliminating the ability to end a contract at the end of its term is against contract law. And so that particular aspect of this that's trying to eliminate, and I think that's the big thrust, trying to eliminate the ability to end a contract at the end of the contract's term is against the constitutional law. There's a contract clause that's put in there that says the states cannot eliminate the obligations of a contract. U.S. Constitution saying the states cannot do that.
Can I just ask you to wrap up your comment?
And that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go for people who haven't spoken yet. And I saw a hand in the back there. And I saw the person in the room first. So who's the name on the Zoom?
It says Dina's iPhone.
We'll do a Zoom one first, and then I've got you next. Thank you, sir.
Hi, guys.
Oh, hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for this time. Let me speak. I have a small business in town. And
Can you just state your name and where you're from for the record, please?
My name is Dina Chadwick, and I live in Brattleboro, Vermont. And I am I've lived here my whole life. I own a small business in town, and I have a rental above it. I am very happy to provide housing for a person, and it works out really well. I oppose this just cause because I find that, well, first of all, there's a lot of legal loopholes in it. It's determining how I run my business in so many different ways. And it's a legal document that says that I can't uphold my legal document, which is crazy. And I really feel for the housing crisis that we're having, it is not the solution to what's going on in Brattleboro. It's only going to hurt, like other people said, is the small people, not the small people, the smaller business owners in town that want to do good. And it is the wrong way to go. We've already taken away our right to have first and last in security. I found that was really terrible too, but I understood that, that was to help people afford places better. And I, went with it, but I own a salon and the renter's right above me. And if I wanted to expand my business, I couldn't do it. I couldn't get the person out. It's not just, and it's not fair. And that's my personal opinion. And I just wanted to share it with all of you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Dina. Next gentleman up. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Dan Normando. I'm a landlord here in Brattleboro. I have been a landlord for 25 plus or minus years, locally and elsewhere. I want to say that I have never, my family has never, and we never will do what we heard over here, a story of that type of casting out of a tenant. And I'll also say that as a landlord locally, we're no strangers to things being lopsided from a treatment standpoint, landlords versus others. But I'm only speaking out tonight because this petition, this proposed ordinance is gone way too far from a lopsidedness. I've heard people mention, I'm not an attorney, but it sounds to me like there's some real legal issues with it. But even more than that, I'll give you an anecdote. As I was leaving tonight, my 18-year-old daughter said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I don't really want to go out tonight, honey. You're home from college, but this is what I'm doing." And she goes, "You have a contract with these people, a lease? And if this passes, they don't have to abide by the lease?" I said, "Well, I'll try to explain it to you later." But it's gone too far. So I liked what Jason mentioned. One thing I've been disappointed is that there really wasn't much of a coming together, sides working together. I really would like to personally, and I know a lot of other landlords that would not just have a discussion, but to work together, put our heads together, not just landlords and tenants, but other people in the community, and try to come up with the solutions. There's a lot of issues. The housing crisis, that's the biggest. This won't solve it, no doubt. I'll leave with, for those folks, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the select board, but I really should be addressing the community because it's the community vote.
Yeah, you can drive, it's fine.
Okay. But I urge you to vote this down so that we can put the time in and the effort and work together on this and to actually do something that will benefit everyone rather than one side. And I'll leave you, for those at home, with a good piece to read that will be helpful, I think. There was a nice viewpoint in the Commons this week that really is poignant, and I think you might enjoy reading that, and it might help you on this vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Let me just look to Zoom. I don't see any hands, and no other hands, so please.
Sally.
Yeah, Sally, welcome back.
Building on what some other people have said, there are thousands of rental units in Brattleboro, and there are hundreds of housing providers, hundreds. Many of them only have 1, 2 units, maybe 12 units. Many of them use their housing as their retirement income. It's a few landlords like the people at Westlake who have made a bad reputation for the hundreds of other housing providers in town. And it is really not fair to the hundreds of housing providers who for years, you've heard this, for decades, have been providing safe housing for the tenants of Brattleboro at reasonable prices. It's not fair to all of them to punish them for what a few bad apples are doing. I do not think that corporate money is going to come in and buy out all the rental units in Brattleboro because they're so, they're smart enough to know that you can't make a lot of money on the little small units in Brattleboro. They're only interested in the big properties. And they're problematic, and it's perplexing to think what to do about them. But the solution to them and their problem, or the problem they're creating, is not to punish everybody else. That's just not fair.
Thank you, Sally. Still no hands on Zoom. I see you, Frick. I'm just looking to see if there's anybody else. I see none. You want to come on up?
Hi, Frick Sprite again. I would like to echo what Sally's, or Mr. Normando said. There are real problems that need real solutions that are well thought out, that are involve a conversation with all of the stakeholders, including the nonprofit sector and people who are landlords, tenants, the planning department. And I've heard concerns about this proposal from all of them. I will also say that I've been at this for, I think, 45 years now, and I've been sick of it several times over. And I actually used to be Marta's landlord and was able to sell that building to one of the tenants, which was to me one of the best outcomes I possibly could have had there. The odds of my being able to sell other buildings to tenants or other local landlords, if I choose to really get out of this, is slim. The people who seem to have money, who want to buy up, bigger buildings, bigger in Brattleboro by Brattleboro standards, over 4 units, are people from out of state. I don't really want to sell to them, but I am weighing whether to actually create some new housing, which is something that I would like to take what I already know and create some better housing, or just get out of the business. And this kind of thing and the way we get treated in the courts and things like the eviction ban that we just experienced in a situation where we could have had full funding for Section 8 and the eviction ban would have been pretty much moot, are the kinds of things that make me think twice about it. I don't want to spend my later years, I'm not young anymore, dealing with that kind of stress and unpredictability. So I would urge the community to support local landlords and their ability to control their own property for the benefit of the good, responsible tenants who are in their properties that are being provided at reasonable prices, as much as we can insulate them from the vagaries of the real world and the things that change, like prices that have doubled in many things recently.
I was going to ask you to wrap up your comment, Frick.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. I see I got a hand on Zoom.
Yep. Abby Manukin.
Yeah.
Sorry. I need to just change my.
Give her the option.
Okay, sorry. There was a computer mishap, but I think, is the echo gone now?
I believe. Oh, but we are now unmuted.
Are you watching it on
Patrick.
a separate screen?
Are we unmuted now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you. Good.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, I know I spoke before, and this will be brief. Abby Manukin, resident and homeowner of Brattleboro, in strong support of this. I just wanted to speak the words "people over profit." It feels like a phrase that needs to be present in this room tonight. And I've heard a lot of landlords talking about losses of wealth and profit and how that will impact them. And I feel for them. And in no way do I want to punish anyone. And wealth and ownership is very different than people being housed and being housed safely and justly. And I think that that needs to be distinguished here. And so just keeping in mind a compassionate community that centers equity and justice and inclusion, economic justice, disability justice, social justice, racial justice, climate justice. I hope the voters will vote yes to this and put people before profit.
Thank you. I think I saw a hand in the room that was someone else, but also Spoon. I don't see the other person now, so we'll go back to Spoon. And then I see another hand on Zoom.
I don't think
Maybe you confused.
Yeah.
Oh, did I Spoon, do you want to speak?
I'm sorry, I thought you were saying you had somebody else.
No, I don't see the person who had their hand up before you.
You're something else.
Well, I want, not long ago, very few years ago, it was really striking and dismaying to know that out at Morningside, there were 50 homeless people living. At this point, that seems almost quaint. If only we had 50 homeless people. Now it's 250. We as long as we keep putting profits over rights, over basic human needs, then the problem will keep escalating. We were already warned by someone here who said the corporations are already in town, buying up everything they can. When do we begin to resist? When do we begin to say no more? I empathize with a lot of the problems that landlords have with some renters. As has been pointed out, we're actually working with very few statistics, very little data here, almost no hard evidence. We're largely involved in an emotional issue, a political issue, a cultural issue between the haves and the have-nots. But I think if we pass this and start to house people, then we need to revisit it and hear from the landlords what their problems are, see the evidence of their problems, and with that evidence then begin to make the fine-tuning on an ordinance like that so that everybody is satisfied.
Thank you, Spoon. Back to Zoom. Who's up? The front one?
Far Mason.
Far, and then who's below that? Kurt, okay.
Kurt Dimes.
All right. Far, welcome. Oh, it's not.
It's a surprise. Sorry.
No worries.
Sonia Silbert, District 3. I'm a homeowner in Brattleboro. I'm also a landlord. And it's like pretty astonishing to me that tonight of all nights with the weather like this, so many people are having problems with making it harder to evict people. There are so many people in our community. Yeah, I see Liz like warming up her hands. There are so many people in our community who are really, really living on the margins and living month to month, and giving them a little bit more protection from literally sleeping out on the streets when this is the kind of weather that we have feels like such an important and needed move for our community. And it is hard to hear so many people say that, like, basically threatening to do Airbnb instead of providing housing for people in our community. That's pretty hard to hear, and it would be nice if Airbnb was way more regulated so that we had more housing units, so that our community could remain affordable and accessible to the folks who have been here, who want to use the services here, who are part of our community. So I really hope that our community, that our town votes for this and remembers how lucky so many of us are to have safe and secure and warm housing, especially on nights like tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. So I think I've got Kurt in Zoom. Do I see any more hands in the room? I don't see any. I'll go after. You'll go after Kurt? Okay.
Camera working this time?
It is not.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll proceed anyway. I think it's actually a little bit of a lack of logic about, playing the compassion card on this issue. Yeah, we are compassionate. My organization is compassionate. We are creating a general wide agenda about housing. We go by legislation, and we go by taking action on creating housing. We have a way of bringing people, getting cheap housing in RVs at BCS headquarters. So we realize we have to create housing also. But it's important to point out that when people talk about the homeless people whom we are now housing at BCS, they are waiting in the snow, or they're waiting to move into those properties where the lease is about to come up. So it actually doesn't serve a humane purpose to let someone stay in a contracted rental after his or her lease is expired. Somebody might be waiting for that. Are we supposed to say, okay, you stay out in the cold because now we have this so-called just cause eviction law? It doesn't make sense. Because we have limited housing, you know, there's got to be a room for people to move in who are waiting for those leases to expire. So that's, I think, you know, the idea of, you know, we got to be compassionate. Yeah, let someone into your home like we do at BCS, or make sure that when someone says he or she is going to move out, that he or she moves out and then someone can move in. So it's the unending lease does not make sense. And we should all vote against this thing. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kurt. And I've actually got a new hand up, so we'll welcome you to the mic. You just...
My name is Leslie Todd. I'm married to a man who owns a number of properties in Brattleboro, rental properties, and I've worked with him within those properties over the past 15 or 20 years. I also have been a social worker working in this county over the past 40 years, working with Child Protective Services, with youth that are needing a lot of help in various ways. And I'm concerned that these anecdotal messages seem to offer the opportunity that these problems can be served and saved, that these problems can be solved by the landlords here in Brattleboro, or at least a big part of that. That's not the problem. The problem is not that. The problem is societal issues that are coming into the forefront right now in Brattleboro, right now in front of us, and every place else in the United States. So it's not feel good to talk about, you know, a friend who was thrown out of her home, about somebody who needs, you know, to get into a better apartment. That might be feeling good. That is not going to solve this problem. And this decision to take away, frankly, property rights of people who own property here is also not going to solve this problem. And I think it's really easy to say, wow, if we just did this, then everything would get better. We all know that's not true, don't we? Don't we?
You want to direct this way?
Beg your pardon?
Just directing your comments to the select board is what I've asked for, please.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry.
Yep, it's okay.
So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Got a hand. I've got a hand here, but I've got a hand there. I just can't see who it is.
Okay. Ellen Schwartz.
I think that's a new.
Yeah, Ellen hasn't spoken.
Hi, let me get my hand down. My name is Ellen Schwartz, and I live in Brattleboro. And I am a homeowner, and I'm actually neither a tenant nor a landlord, though I spent most of my life before I bought this home with another person who lives downstairs. I spent most of my life before that as a tenant, and I'm speaking in support of this resolution. I joined the meeting a little late, but since I've been on, like mostly what I've been hearing is about landlords from the landlord community as landlords as victims, either legal victims, financial victims, or that their property rights are being eroded by this or will be eroded by this. And it feels to me like that's a financial way to look at housing, like you've made an investment and you're being victimized. But for a tenant, housing is like a roof over your head. And I feel like that's what's being lost in this conversation that is largely about the legal property and financial rights of landlords, that if you are evicted as a tenant for no cause, you don't have a roof over your head unless you're lucky enough to find another one. I actually was no cause evicted a very long time ago when I was a tenant, it was a situation that actually would have been covered by one of the exemptions in the in this proposal. It was an owner occupied property where the owner wanted to use my apartment for another purpose, and that would be considered an exemption in this. And at the time, the housing market was a lot, it was easier to find housing, and I was able to find some housing in another community and keep a roof over my head. But that's a very scary situation to be in when you have a few months to find another place to live, and particularly right now with the housing crisis. And the one other thing I would say that I agree with both landlords and tenants bringing up is that this proposal, if it does pass, would not solve all the housing problems in our community. And I think everybody who's spoken has spoken to that. And it's just, it's a drop in the bucket. It's one protection that keeps a roof over the heads of people who are who would be subject to no cause eviction. But we also need the larger solutions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I've got Aaron with his hand up, and I just want to remind people, trying to conclude this first public hearing at around 8 o'clock, and we're getting a few hands left, so I just would encourage people, if you got kind of a last comment that you want to make on this first hearing, to keep in mind when we're trying to land
I
this.
think the heating system has quit.
Yes, I also
was
agree with
a
you
long
on
time
that
ago.
one, Spoon. So,
It has, by the way, and
It
I'm,
has quit.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
very sorry for that.
Call your landlord.
We have somebody and he
That's us.
won't be here till morning, so.
yeah, so,
Wait a minute, this place is gonna be without heat overnight?
yeah. So anyhow, I actually am just going to keep this moving. So, Aaron, if you want to come on back up.
So the real issue here would disappear about this no-cause eviction if we had enough units where vacancies weren't an issue and people could just find another place. So the real issue is not enough units. The last thing you want to do is put more constraints on possible developers and landlords to have units. Because if you take away their ability to run their business and you dictate what happens, people are going to be less interested in developing more units. So if we want more units, we should vote no on this article.
Thank you, Aaron. Kurt, and this is your third time, so I'll ask you just to keep your comment pretty brief.
30 seconds.
Real brief. Mr. Chairman, I hope you take a poll afterwards at the end to ask participants if anyone has changed his or her mind. I'd like to know if anyone has changed their mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Any other hands? And I don't see any on Zoom. Oh, okay. Is that,
Looks like Sonia Silbert.
all right.
Well.
No, no, it's fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
actually, this time it is me.
Okay.
Thank you all. I haven't spoken previously because I'm experiencing a little vertigo, and so my brain's a little wobbly and sloshy at the moment. So I apologize if I come off a little incoherently. But one thing that just keeps coming up to me is we're hearing a lot from the landlords because they have a lot more time and opportunity to be able to show up to things like this. I think that's part of the dynamic. And I want to call out whose stories we're actually hearing here. We keep hearing about these anecdotes that are supposed to be motivating the conversation. But I've only really heard one anecdote from the tenant's perspective. For the most part, it's just been the landlords telling their anecdotes. And I think there's a reason, aside from the fact that tenants have less time and opportunity to show up to hearings like this, they probably are also aware that the room is going to be filled with probably their landlord. And, that's a sort of obvious disincentive for them to actually speak their mind, especially if they plan to speak in favor of this just cause eviction charter change, because they without any just cause eviction protections, they can be easily retaliated against by their landlords. So yeah, I just ask people to think about that as they think about whose voices are being heard here and what's being represented and in terms of what the town as a whole actually wants. Thank you.
Thank you, Far. And that was the same hand?
Different hand. You want to go to the Zoom?
And no other hands here? Okay. You may be our last speaker. Let's, who is it?
A-Lab? Maybe?
Hey, Chris Kane here.
Welcome, Chris.
I just want to reiterate what Har said just now. There is way too much representation at this specific meeting for landlords. There are far more renters than there are landlords at this meeting right now currently. So I want you to take in consideration that fact, first of all. Second, I just want to say that it's really tough for us renters right now. The rent just keeps going up and our wages aren't going up. Inflation's also going up. I think that's probably what I'm going to end it at right now because I could go off the rails right now on this kind of thing. Anyways, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, folks, I don't see any other hands. I think before I close out this first public hearing, I just want to remind people that there's a second public hearing next Tuesday, the 7th. The board's going to convene their select board meeting at 6:15. And by the board, I mean me and the people here. And I believe that this is going to be right after the consent agenda. So if you're interested in speaking and you didn't have an opportunity to tonight, or you want to say more, probably around 7 o'clock on Tuesday the 7th is when we'll probably get around to it. And I'm going to probably have a little bit less time than tonight so that we can get to the other business of the board. But there will be an opportunity to speak if you'd like. Board, anything before I close this out?
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think at this time, I'm going to close the first of the two hearings on the petition for the charter change. Thank you all very much for coming out, and if possibly, we'll see you on Tuesday. Thank you.